Back live tonight here on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. Electricity Minister Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa is confident that there will be lower stages of load shedding this coming winter. However, he has cautioned that there may be periodic snags. In this morning's briefing, the minister also touched on the recent VGBE report about the parastatal's affairs. The minister joins me now in studio for more on that. Minister, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mdluli, and good evening to the viewers back at home.
And for periodically keeping us updated and understanding exactly what is happening, because we just see the dark and we are worried that nothing is actually happening. So we need to know more often what is actually the cause of what we are going through. But of course, the VGBE report has dominated much of the headlines. Let's start there before we come to your 10-point action plan. Overall, I didn't read the whole report. I don't act like I did, but I picked up some key issues. One of the key issues that would be a challenge maybe for the government to look at is that there is no criteria that defines the end of life of a power plant. It's one thing that they are putting out, saying that plant decommissioning is happening prematurely. Just address that for us.
Well, maybe just a bit of context. The VGB report was commissioned by National Treasury. And remember, that predates the introduction of the Ministry of Electricity in the presidency. So National Treasury really wanted to have a much more detailed appreciation on the technical performance of the Eskom fleet, because I think at the time they didn't have a full appreciation. And of course, there was a request to put 254 billion rands of fiscal injection. So it was important that we get an independent opinion on the performance of these assets, so that against those recommendations we are able to measure the performance of Eskom and whether there's a correct allocation of capital that has been drawn out of that fiscal injection. And the VGB report, of course, commissioned in February of last year, 2023, it does make three transversal points. So the first one, it addresses the issues of human capacities or the skills issues, the issues around morale, the issues around competence, as they put it, and then it addresses the issues of plant performance, which is exactly the question you are raising, and then there are engineering issues. So on the plant performance, I think the observation was that there's, as they call it, the affixation to the energy availability factor. So essentially, in their own calculation or observation, is that there's some degree of expediency in the manner in which Eskom is undertaking maintenance. So essentially, they allow the units to run even beyond an acceptable limit. And what they are cautioning against is that if you allow that kind of dispensation to happen, you are going to have a catastrophic failure at the end. So it's important that you keep within the discipline of what we call philosophy maintenance. There will be areas of opportunity maintenance so that you are able to pull out these units and fix them. Of course, there's a context why that has not been happening. There are legacy issues at Eskom. The deterioration of the Eskom balance sheet undermines the ability of Eskom to make the kind or the scale of maintenance that is required, hence the capital injection. And of course, I mean, these units are designed for a particular life. On average, is about 50 years. But the assumption is that you are going to be doing maintenance so that you are able to realize, if you like, the full life cycle of those units. So if you don't do maintenance,
has given mileage to those who've been saying, well, this decision to decommission the power plants is political in a sense, but it is also economical in other sense, because there is pressure from lobby groups who give government money to say, no, we want you to decommission these things prematurely so that you can add IPP so that we can make more money. Their report seemingly indicates that if you're doing maintenance at the quality and level that it's supposed to be done, and you're putting enough budget in that aspect of that maintenance, these things can go on forever.
Well, 2 points to be made there. I don't think that there should be a binary conversation between the addition of new generation capacity coming from renewables. So essentially, if you like, the system requires both renewables and base load. So I'm just saying there should not be a conflation of the two, juxtaposing one against the other. I think we need both. But just coming to your point, you are on point. I mean, part of the reason why there was that fiscal injection was to allow for this greater maintenance. I mean, just to put it into context, during the December of 2023 to January of 2024, we ramp up maintenance. We took out 18% of the total generation capacity, about 9,000 megawatts, into planned maintenance. The last time it was done was in 2020. So essentially over the period of 3 years, we have not seen the scale of investment on planned maintenance. And that's an appreciation by the leadership of ESCOM, starting with the board led by Dr. Mteto, and the leadership now with Mr. Caleb Kasim and now Dan Marokane. Just an appreciation that for us to be able to sweat this asset and extract as much value as possible, it's important that you are able to invest money in them. And that's why every time I talk about short-term pain, long-term gain. What is a short-term pain? Is that you've taken out significant amount of megawatts to fix them, and the pain is that they...
I mean, what do you say to that critique of Hugo Kruger, who says all you're dealing with is partial load losses?
No,
you are not dealing with the actual problem. You're taking this thing off the load completely and doing quality fixing of it before you bring it.
Let's put that into context. So when we during the peak of demand, that is winter, the amount of planned maintenance was sitting at a ceiling of about 2,500 megawatts. And immediately when we went out of that, we took off these units out, all of them out. When I say out, so they don't remain on load. And we took out 9,000 megawatts. So we ramped them up almost threefold for us to be able to get to where we are now. So I think that the
time when we were nearly at stage 8, or maybe we were there?
No, we're never at stage 8. No, I mean, one of the things that I undertook is that we are going to be transparent. I mean, that's why we give regular briefings when we reach levels of stage 6. I'm the first one to come and explain to the nation. And if we were to exceed those levels, I'll share with the nation really what the facts are and what are we doing to resolve this question. But to your point, I think we have ramped up planned maintenance. The point I was making earlier on short-term pain, long-term gain. And we are beginning to see that there's a degree of attenuation of the intensity of load shedding. And we are going to see that the overall trend line continues in that direction. I mean, just to give you a sense, and the viewers at home, if you do a computation of the amount of load shedding, December of 2022 coming into January of 2023, comparable period December of 2023 coming to January of 2024, I mean, there's been significant reduction. And in fact, in the past 12 weeks, we have seen about a reduction of about 66% of the intensity of load shedding to about from 5.8 terawatt hours of load shedding to 1.97 terawatt hours of load shedding.
In actual fact? Because as we were briefing even earlier on, I can't be thinking to say, you can say that you've ramped it up in such a degree, right? But how do I, as a South African, sit here and know that you really did do a good job? Because if the unit still comes back and there are boiler tube failures, how well of a job did you actually do?
No, it's a fair question, Mdluli. So what we have seen as a trend is that when the units come back from planned maintenance, there's a significant reduction in repeat failures. So if you bring unit X from power station Y, you find that there are no significant failures out of that unit. So for us, that's an excellent indicator of the fact that the team is doing a tremendous amount of work. And of course, we have improved that technical capacity by additional investment in Roadtech Industries, which is an engineering arm of ESCOM, significantly bolstered. The current head of generation comes from the ranks of Roadtech Industries, appreciates the value that Roadtech can add. So Roadtech, working with the original equipment manufacturers, we're beginning to ramp up that technical capacity. Okay. And the net result is that when the units come back, they remain on load and they approximate their design capacity. Essentially, the levels of efficiency are going higher. Where you see the cluster of failures of these units, in many instances, is units that are yet to be taken out on planned maintenance. But I think the assurance we have is that they remain on load, and that's the confidence that we have.
So
on the
this
quality
view
of
the report that you are being hampered by budget, firstly, that you are unable to bring in the right technology in terms of the quality of your maintenance that is able to take us into the future, and therefore it's partial load losses that you're dealing with. But if you were to have the right budget and the right money pumped into these and bring in the right technology, these things can be extended nearly indefinitely.
Oh, that observation was correct before there was that fiscal injection from National Treasury. So the point I'm making is that that has been significant relief, that injection from National Treasury. Like I said earlier on, we have seen unprecedented levels of plant maintenance, 18% of generation capacity. That was taken out December to January of this year. The last time we experienced those proportions of plant maintenance was in 2020. And then to your point, yes, you are absolutely correct. So there are two parts to this conversation. Is the reliability of the units, the rate at which units fail on their own. And I've spoken about plant maintenance. When they come back, they remain on load. That is, they produce the megawatts, and not just produce them, but produce them at the levels that approximate their design capacity. So we have increased the levels of efficiency. And then the second variable that we are addressing is that of partial load losses. So the load is, the unit is not off load. It's still on load, it's producing the megawatts, but like I always use the metaphor of a car. So the car is on the road, can reach maximum speeds of 120 kilometers an hour. You put your foot to the pedal, the accelerator, it only reaches 60 kilometers an hour. So it's still on the road, it's not off, unlike when we took it out. But you are losing out on that 60 kilometers. And those are the partial load losses. We have identified the power stations that are notorious for those partial load losses. Matimba is one of them. Kendal is one of them. And really at Matimba is vacuum losses. The design of the power station is that it's cooled using ambient temperature, and because of the intensity of the heat in the Lephalale area, you are not able to cool it at the right level, and therefore you bring down, if you like, your output. And then when you go to Kendal, the main issue is around the emissions level. If you ramp it up to those levels, so let's go back to that car, if you ramp it up to 120 kilometers an hour, the amount of emission that it releases at the exhaust is such that it exceeds the license parameters.
Yes.
And that's why you have
one of the other issues
and that's why the point
external regulators were hampering you to be able to produce at that level, because you lack the energy to be able to deal with that kind of emission.
Hampering is not the right word. I would not characterize it as hampering. Remember that the regulator has got an obligation to protect communities within the neighboring area.
Indeed.
We know the science has proven there's a relationship between the amount of emission and climate change. You can see the devastation it's causing in the northwest, and also in KZN and other parts of the world. So we have that obligation. So the issue is the point you raised earlier on, is to ensure that we embrace new technologies, allows us an opportunity to ramp up without additional harm to the environment, so exceeding our license parameters. Yeah. So the point I'm making is that you can do both. And that's why I said earlier on, you are absolutely correct. So part of this fiscal injection is to ensure that you modernize the plant. There's existing technologies in other parts of the world. Some of the power stations are much, much older than ours. They use the same fuel source, which is coal, but they are emitting less and less. And in fact, their parameters are significantly lower what is legislated in the country. And that's why Mr. Nxumalo, of course, supported by the board, is scouring the world looking at those solutions. And we are going to import them into the country so that we are able to address this situation.
Right. Let's get back then to that report again. One of the issues that they raise before we come to the expansion of the grid is that it's not an engineering challenge, but how it is managed. Now, when you came in, you said you're an engineer, you speak to the engineers, you understand each other. That's why you did the whole tour, to speak to the engineers, for them to come to tell you exactly what is the problem, engineering-wise, technically-wise, so that you get to understand each other. The German guys are saying, well, it's really a management issue, in a sense that politicians are interfering with the technical stuff, then the work that they need to do. Hence, one of the guys says, one of the issues that needs to be sorted out as then Morocco comes in is that you need to have one minister and not 3 of them? Because if there are 3 people talking to him, it confused the whole thing.
Well, maybe just to say the following, just a bit of context. The introduction of the minister in the presidency responsible for electricity, if you come to think of it, is an intervention, just an admission that you are faced with an existential problem of proportions that will undermine the growth of the economy. And there's stats that suggest and also evidence that points to the fact that load shedding is a structural constraint to the South African economy. And on the occasion of the delivery of the budget, the Minister of Finance makes the same observation. The Governor of the Reserve Bank, when he releases the outcomes of the Monetary Policy Committee, does makes the point. Load shedding, inefficiencies on the logistics side are undermining our ability to grow the economy. So I think there's that overall appreciation of the impact of load shedding. And that's why the President took the view that let's have a focused minister who's just transfixed on the resolution of this problem. And what he since did was to delineate the responsibility between the Minister of the DMRE and also the Minister of DPE, and also just the Minister of Electricity also understand the relationship with the ESCOM, the board of ESCOM as the executive authority. Yeah. So we have created a platform where myself, Minister Godan, and the chair of the board, we get to exchange views. So first we agree what are the kind of interventions that are necessary, and then we then answer the question, who's going to play which role, so that we don't step on each other's toes and we don't overreach. And then we then bring the CEO of ESCOM, so that as I articulate what the interventions are, and you will have seen that in all our media updates, we are with ESCOM. So it's not like the ministry is there and ESCOM is there. So we're pulling together. I think it's just an obsession to resolve this problem, and appreciating that together we can go further in the resolution of this problem. Yeah. Yes, at the time when they came in and when they put the report together, the space was opaque. There was no that determination which ministry is supposed to do what, and now there's a clear lines of who does what. So I guess that on that account, that question has been resolved. And like I said, we've created a platform. In instances where there's a risk of overreaching, then we resolve that quickly and we're able to move. And that dispensation has proven to be very effective, and you have seen that we are not at cross purpose in the message that we are articulating. Right. And we keep on improving that. And of course, with the introduction of the new CEO, now there's certainty there. Mr. Caleb Kasim has done exceptionally well. I think you can't overstate the contribution that the acting CEO played in contributing towards the resolution of this problem. Of course, it's not yet extinguished load shedding, but it was immense what Caleb did. I mean, he comes in there, someone who's not necessarily affair with the technical machinations, the issues around engineering, someone who's a CFO, but raised his hand in the interest of the country, says it's fine. I mean, I'll put my head on the block, and we have walked the journey where we are at. Mr. Marokane is taking over. I'm very confident, bullish about the prospects of resolving this question. Yeah. Of course, for the viewers at home, justifiably, I just want my lights on 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365. We'll get to that point. Yeah. It's just the gradual resolution of this problem. And I'm sure that people can see that there's a marked improvement. There's going to be those occasional temporary setbacks. We'll address those, but I think, if you like, the trend line still is positive, and we're confident about the ability to resolve this question.
It's a volatile time in the country in terms of elections. Yes. They're very divisive in their nature. And within the ESCOM family, you've got varying views, and you've got Labour there with their own sorts of issues that they would want to raise. What kind of an organization is Mr. Marokane coming back into, because he's been there before, in terms of the morale on the ground and being able to get people to rally around a single cause of making sure that the lights stay on and we keep the economy working and dealing with the challenges that the country faces?
Well, first, I must just give kudos to the board. I think the board has done exceptionally well. I mean, it's a combination of men and women, exceptionally qualified, took the risk I mean, like everyone say, Eskom is a poison chalice. You might destroy your career, your credentials and your profile, but these are men and women tried and tested, and they just took on the responsibility. And what they did was to make some of the most inspired, in my view, appointments. I mean, appointing Mr. Beki Nxumalo to be the head of generation. He went further to ensure that he introduced some degree of stability at all the power stations. When he came in, I think there were about 4 or 5 power stations where they had the acting GMs. That environment is now stabilized. And he drew from the ranks of Eskom. He never recruited from outside. He had an appreciation of the people with the necessary skills, the kind of acumen and the intellectual faculties to help us to resolve this problem. For an example, Tutuga, one of our most problematic power stations, 6 units, of course, one has been out for an extended period of time and unlikely to come back, was operating just 1 unit generating. Took one of the most seasoned GM to be Mr. Bruce Moyo to head Tutuga, stabilized Quebec, brought the GM, a new GM now at Kusile, one of our newest power stations. So it was that stability. The second thing that Mr. Nxumalo did was to ensure that there's some degree of incentive. So when I went to visit the power stations, I used the template. So I'll engage with management, and then outside them I'll engage with the organized labor, and then I'll engage with just the general workers. And engaging really means that getting feedback, hearing from them what the issues are. What came out consistently across the fleet of Eskom or the power stations when I engaged just the ordinary men and women, we're saying that, look, I mean, we're giving our all. Over a period of 3 years, we haven't received any form of incentives. We do appreciate that we are going through the most difficult period. So is everyone in the country. We raised the issue with the management of Eskom. Guess what? They responded and said, of course, they've now put together an incentive performance package, having engaged with the unions. You see that the morale is going up. The affirmation of internal appointments, promoting from within, before you look outside, again, just a confirmation of the morale. And also just normalizing the relationship between labor and management. I mean, it's inherently conflictual, but you find that there's some degree of harmony as a result of a common appreciation that if we are not working together, we will not be able to resolve this challenge. So he's coming into an environment that is becoming more and more stable. And I think given his credentials, he's not an outsider per se. As you know, he's someone who was within Eskom before, went out, he's come back, has got an appreciation of what are the networks that obtains there. He has a knowledge of who the personalities are, but also knows, if you like, the performance of this unit. So the learning curve will be very steep for someone who's coming from outside. I think it will take you on average 6 to 8 months for you to understand what's happening. But I think the learning curve with Mr. Marukwan is very rapid because he comes from that environment. Of course, there was a hiatus of about 3 years. He's coming back, so he's hitting the ground running. But all I'm saying is that there's a layer below him that has been stabilized. A board that is design the recovery plan. He'll come in, I mean, naturally as the accounting officer, just to ensure that he cements that, he gives it a bit of color, fingerprints there, just to show he's present, and also enhance, if you like, the work that is there. He's not going to replace.
So they'll not make massive changes?
Yes, I really don't expect. If he does, of course, he'll substantiate. But I must say that the board has done tremendously well to put together that recovery plan.
All right, back live tonight. We'll get into the 10-point plan with the Electricity Minister, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, in a moment. But let's talk about the last point that I wanted to touch on. Connecting additional renewable generation capacity requires, they say, a significant grid expansion. And that significant grid expansion seemingly will need a lot of internal human resources, which you do not have. You might be budgeting, I think, 74.2 billion by 2028, 2 billion in 2024, 10.1 billion by 2026, but you don't have the human resource to be able to carry out that expansion.
Well, I think there are 3 dimensions to that. So first, I mean, the nature of the problem is that, I mean, it's a legacy issue. I mean, if you look at the density of transmission, essentially it derives from the fact that the power stations are constructed at the mouth of the fuel source, which is coal mines. Yeah. And we know that those deposits are in the northeastern parts of the country. Right. And that's where your transmission density is. Because once you generate the electrons, if you like, the electricity, then you must transport it through the highways. And those highways are what we call transmission line. And that's why close to 80% of your load, consumption of energy, is in Gauteng going to the north. Because we don't want the electrons to be traveling long distances, because we are likely going to suffer technical losses. Now, as a result of that, it means that the Cape provinces, the Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, don't have a sufficient or extensive transmission capacity. Now, as we transition to cleaner forms of fuel, so this is solar PV and also wind. If you are to do an irradiation level, a radiation atlas trying to understand the best quality of the sun in the country is in the Northern Cape. If you were to do a wind atlas, where are you going to find the best wind speed consistently, is in the coastal areas, Western Cape and Eastern Cape. And that's why you have a concentration of solar plant activity in the Northern Cape, and also wind project in the Western and the Eastern Cape. Okay. The problem you have is that as you generate, then you must use the transmission. But I just said you don't have transmission. So the little transmission capacity we had in the Northern Cape is exhausted. In the Western Cape is exhausted. In the Eastern Cape is about to be exhausted. And that's why you had bid window number 6, where about 2,000 megawatts remains unallocated because of grid capacity. So we, in terms of Eskom's computation, using what they call the transmission development plan, it's got a 10-year horizon. They think that will need about 14,000 kilometers of new lines and modernization of existing lines. Just to put that into context, in the past 10 years, they did 4,000 kilometers. But in the next 10 years, they must do 14,000 kilometers. It's 325% fold increase. So to your point, because we need to be a bit more aggressive, it will not necessarily have a significant amount of internal capacity to be able to prosecute a program of that magnitude. And that's why, parallel to the transmission development plan, the internally Eskom is working out how to recruit that capacity so that we have technical expertise internally. We don't necessarily rely on outside the expertise. The second issue is the financing. We think that we'll need in the order of magnitude of 390 billion rands. The Eskom balance sheet has deteriorated. The fiscal matrix also is sovereign fiscal matrix has deteriorated. So it simply means that the Eskom balance sheet, the sovereign balance sheet, can't carry that scale of a size of a ticket of investment. So you need to tap into the liquidity of the private sector. But in doing so, you must ensure that you don't relinquish ownership of the grid, because it's a strategic asset. And that's why we're designing, if you like, bespoke models on how to access that. Then the last one, you are going to sit with the issues on the industry, whether the industry is ready to support the scale of investment of this program. So essentially to construct, if you like, your power lines, to construct the substations, the transformers, you mentioned them. The steel industry should be lined up so that there's capacity available, and then we should bolster capacity utilization. But the steel industry will not invest if there's no certainty that this plan stretches over a period of years, because you are sitting with that investment, your return on investment. And that's why we need to ready a local industry, the steel industry as an example, to prepare itself, so that on the back of this crisis, you are able to localize. So create the industrial capacity to meet demand. Yeah. So if you are able to illustrate with certainty that the demand is there, and we are going to go out to market to procure that, then the industry will organize itself better. And that's where your IDC comes into the picture to bolster your black industrialists to take opportunity of what is going to be this expansion. So what's the point I'm making is that you can broaden the flow of your industrial capacity on the back of the resolution of this crisis. We don't need to be importing panels because they see through of what the demand is on the panels for PV, so you must localize. I mean, if you look at China, how they achieved the kind of growth that they've achieved, they went into import substitution industrialization. So as opposed to bringing things from outside, you localize. And you also burden those who want to import by placing some degree of taxes, those who want to export taxes, so that you force them to localize. And over a period of time, they become more efficient, they invest in new technologies, they become more competitive. And as we resolve the South African problem, suddenly the market is bigger. In the context of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, our neighboring countries will go that route. And then we're going to seize our hitherto, if you like, leadership of industry on the continent. I mean, we've been the preeminent player in industrialization. Yes. Our position was almost unassailable, of course. We are being overtaken by, in the north, Egypt. There are other people who are doing exceptionally well to the east, the Kenyans, the Nigerians are also coming on stream. So it's important that you bolster industrial capacity, and then of course on the back of that you'll be able to create employment in the secondary sectors of manufacturing, in the primary sector of mining, because these inputs are needed, you beneficiate them, and you are able to construct, if you like, the kind of infrastructure that is needed. So as you resolve the energy crisis, you do that just transition, and the just in the South African context is also about the industrialization, the new skills for the new economy, and in that way the economy grows as we resolve the issues of load shedding.
Let's touch on your 10-point plan. I mean, others are saying it's been a 10-point plan, or is it a new one, the reiteration of the old 10-point plan? What is this 10-point plan that you're talking about? Better coal management. What does that mean? There's been a big issue around the fact that there are evergreen contracts, for example, at Eskom. One of the guys was CEO said, no, I touched those, and that's why I got kicked out, because they don't want me to touch those evergreen contracts. When you say better coal management, what are you going?
Well, maybe just to make the point that on the 10-point plan, I'm not announcing anything new, and it's not my space to say to Eskom what are the managerial intervention that needs to be made. What Eskom was saying, simply saying, is that in 2022 they designed a 10-point plan, and if you look at the studies that were done by the Ministerial Technical Task Team Review Committee by the DP in 2019. You look at the work, a study done by the World Bank in 2022. You look at the WSP report commissioned by the Eskom board last year. You look at the VGBE report. You look at the diagnostic report that I generated having visited the power station. They all identify, like I said, 3 transversal areas, but those can be unpacked in the 10 points. And what Eskom is saying is that, but this is what we had since 2022. Yeah. So what they need to do is just to refresh it in the context of what has come out, but also the kind of, if you like, challenges that we are focusing on. Just on the coal plant, I mean, they do have that. For an example, let's take Kusile. I mean, you are going to get to a situation by end of this year where you'll be running 6 units, and the fuel source is coal. This is not a cost-plus mine yet, so essentially they are not mining the coal opposite the power station, and then they bring the coal by conveyor belt. They are still working on that. It's going to take them 2 years. So in the process, the coal must come from somewhere. So you can appreciate, I mean, six units of that size. So you need to work on where are you going to source that coal, what is that quality of coal, the logistics of transporting it there, the logistics of offloading it there, the logistics of getting it to the unit. So they are working on that. And then there were issues previously of the quality of the coal, because now you remain exposed, because you are bringing from various sources. Yes. So you are not sure of the quality, you don't know what has happened before the truck can get there. Eskom is addressing those. There are issues around corruption that says that we need to address the scourge of corruption. It just undermines our ability to respond in the most effective fashion to the resolution of load shedding. Working with work stream number 6 from the National Electricity Crisis Committee, NUCOM, they are focused on the resolution and attention to detail in the resolution of crime, corruption, and leakage. So it's populated by people with the right skills. They're making those interventions. I think it's over 500 investigations, over 100 arrests, I think over 20 prosecutions. It goes on and on. The issues around procurement, whether you, in some instances, you don't need the middleman, go to the original equipment manufacturer. The speed of procurement is faster. You get competitive pricing, and then you get, if you like, warranties on the parts that you are procuring. Address the issues of design deficit in the new build of Kusile and Medupi. Those were ventilated at Zondo, so they require specific attention. We are addressing those. The issues of funding, the fiscal injection has been given, but ESCOM has to be financially sustainable. The fact that at the beginning of the current financial year, municipalities collectively are owing ESCOM 64 billion rand. It's a significant strain and continues to grow. Quarter by quarter, about 4.7 billion rand. If you follow that, so it means that it will be 64 billion plus another 18 billion rand. So essentially it's bringing to about 82 billion rand. That is owed to ESCOM. You need to address that issue. So it's a whole range of intervention. So what they are doing now is to refresh that in the context of these reports that are coming and see in the most methodical, orchestrated and deliberate fashion how best we are going to resolve these questions. So it's a multiplicity of variables that are in the air. So it's important that you find a way of addressing them almost simultaneously to be able to get the kind of results that are desired.
Minister, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming in. That's Minister Kgosientsho Ramokgopa there with the Department of Electricity, or the Ministry of Electricity.